Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to The World Over Live. Controversy continues to swirl around this HHS mandate. Even if the church is granted some accommodation, Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska says there needs to be conscience protections for everybody. He'll join us to discuss his bill, and I'll show you what happened when I tried to question Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius this week about the contraceptive mandate. You won't want to miss it. And later, Facebook announced this week that it is considering allowing children under 12 to join the social network. Could this expose kids to new threats? And would you let your child join Facebook if you were involved? Attorney and child advocate Elizabeth Yore joins us to explore. And finally, we'll introduce you to the new president and CEO of Catholic Relief Services, Dr. CAROLYN WOO. She'll talk about CRS's latest efforts to help those in precarious situations around the world. As always, you can be part of the program, so get your calls and emails in now. The number is 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally 205-271-2980. Or drop us an email at worldover@ewtn.com. I particularly want to hear what your experience with your children and if they've had trouble online, and would you let them join Facebook? Okay, let's get started. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Another massacre in Syria. According to reports, regime forces literally or allegedly murdered 78 people in a central Hama village. More than half of those killed were women and children. The Associated Press obtained amateur footage of the purported victims of the massacre. The heartbreaking video, taken in a makeshift morgue, shows the corpses of several young children, including toddlers and infants. We won't show you the most disturbing images. According to Syria's main opposition group In Exile, government-aligned militia converged on the village, then shot, stabbed, or burned alive their victims. Syrian troops have since blocked United Nations observers from reaching the site of the killings. Government officials have called the opposition's claims absolutely baseless and insisted it is cooperating with the work of foreign observers. And on Sunday, another terrorist attack against Christians in Nigeria as a suicide bomber drove his car into a church compound, detonating his explosives as worshipers left an early morning service. At least 12 were killed and another 25 were wounded as the powerful blast caused the partial collapse of the church with worshipers still inside. Jihadist group Boko Haram claimed responsibility, bringing this year's total of those killed by the organization to more than 500. The tragedy was made worse in the immediate aftermath of the attack, when Nigerian military shot and killed 8 and wounded 20 in their effort to secure the blast area. According to reports, those killed were mostly women and children rushing to mourn loved ones. And in his first public comments on the Vatileaks scandal, Secretary of State Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone has confirmed speculation that the ongoing leak of confidential Vatican documents is an organized effort, one that he described as an attack on the Pope. In an interview with Italy's Rai Television, the top Vatican administrator compared the leaks to the internal attacks leveled against Pope Paul VI. This time, however, the attacks, he said, quote, are more carefully aimed, sometimes ferocious, destructive, and organized. In spite of it all, Cardinal Bertone said the Holy Father isn't overly worried about the scandal. Bertone and the papal secretary, Monsignor Georg Ganswein, seem to be the target of the Vatileaks documents. The suspected papal butler, who is being held for questioning at the Vatican, has implicated 2 cardinals in the scandal, according to the London Telegraph, but they haven't been named. Meanwhile, another batch of correspondence was delivered anonymously to the Italian paper La Repubblica. They came with a note saying that hundreds more would be made public soon, or could be made public soon. On the eve of the 50th International Eucharistic Congress in Dublin, a new survey suggests a crisis of faith in Ireland. According to the Irish Times poll, less than a third of Irish Catholics attend Mass weekly, and only a fourth believe in the real presence of the Eucharist. On a positive note, most Catholics and non-Catholics believe the Church has had a broadly positive influence in Ireland. This in spite of several years of bad publicity stemming from a decades-long clerical abuse crisis. Meanwhile, Pope Benedict's legate to the International Eucharistic Congress in Dublin, Cardinal Mark Willett, says the event will be an extraordinary moment in the Church in Ireland and the starting point of a new path. EWTN will bring you live coverage of the International Eucharistic Congress beginning on June 10th. Go to EWTN.com for details and times. And big news for American Catholics as Pope Benedict announced his intentions to visit Philadelphia in 2015. The Holy Father chose Philadelphia to host the next World Meetings of Families as he closed the 2012 meeting in Milan. The World Meeting of Families brings together hundreds of thousands of Catholics every 3 years to celebrate family life and marriage. Cardinal Ennio Antonelli, the president of the Pontifical Council for the Family, said Philadelphia was chosen because of the current battles over abortion and marriage in the United States. The Cardinal said promoting traditional marriage has become necessary in this historic moment in the U.S. And in California, Proposition 8, the previously struck down 2008 law protecting marriage, is headed to the nation's high court. On Tuesday, the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals declined to revisit the decision by two of its judges, which found that the voter-approved law defining marriage as the union of one man and one woman violates the civil rights of gays and lesbians in California. The decision clears the way for a marriage showdown at the Supreme Court. Prop 8 backers immediately confirmed they would take the case to the High Court. A decision as to whether it will hear the case is expected by the fall. When we return, Congressman Jeff Fortenberry will tell us about his efforts to protect conscience under the health care law, not only for the Church, but for the general public. He'll explain when The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My first guest is a member of the House of Representatives from the great state of Nebraska. He's long been concerned about conscience protections in the health care law. And he says it goes far beyond just protecting church institutions. Please welcome Republican Congressman Jeff Fortenberry to the program.
Thank you, Raymond.
Great to see you again, Congressman.
You as well.
Let's start. I want to back up a little bit. There was a huge story out of Wisconsin this week, a recall election of Governor Walker there. He won that recall, which sort of defied expectations, certainly confounded all the polling. The thing I found interesting, the Catholics in Wisconsin voted for Walker by a 10-point margin, up 10 points. Your thoughts on this, and is this indicative of what we might see nationally, and why do you think they may have gone that way?
Well, I think people in general are very fatigued by the current political dynamics. And a lot of people who have lived their lives trying to raise their family well, take care of their business, produce things, participate in church life, I think are realizing that engaging as citizens, even going beyond voting and being informed to actually forming political associations, standing for what you believe in the public forum is the new order of the day. The threats out there are that real. The philosophical divide in the country is very, very deep. And a number of people are now stepping up and saying, I have to act. I have to do my duty as an American citizen. We're people who self-governs. And I think a lot of people are realizing they have to engage. And perhaps this is indicative of a new trend.
We have been seeing a lot of coverage really since Vice President Biden and President Obama came out in support of gay marriage in a very vocal way. My question is, as you look at the poll, there was a poll that came out that said 54% of Americans now support gay marriage. What impact do you think that announcement will have in a general election, particularly among Catholic swing voters?
Well, I think most people are interested in preserving, protecting, upholding traditional marriage. They don't want to see any form of discrimination. They don't want to see an environment in which people are persecuted or anything like that. But it's hard to say those things publicly anymore. So maybe, again, behind the curtain when everything is quiet and you're alone, people are voting in a different direction to uphold some fundamental ideals. The basic form, the most intimate form of community is the family. Marriage in its nature, in its essence, is between a man and a woman. It's been a fundamental principle of social organization across time and across culture for the well-being of men and women, but particularly children. So and I think there's a generational issue here as well. So while you stand against discrimination at the same time, you uphold this most essential element for the building of society. I don't know. It's politically volatile. I don't know if it has a factor here in this particular election or will in the fall, but it's on people's minds.
I want to talk about the HHS mandate. This has consumed so much of the attention, certainly in the Catholic world and far beyond. I know a lot of business people are looking at this, and people in the general culture, who self-insure. This is going to require them to provide contraceptives, abortifacients, and sterilization services to their employees, and in some cases to family who are employed under their plan. Some say, don't get involved in the political process. The bishops should sit down and stop saying anything about this. Wait for the court. The Supreme Court's going to rule in the next few weeks. Why should we be concerned beyond that?
Well, there has to be a three-pronged strategy here. And the first strategy did not work, telling the administration that this rule is unjust, unfair, and unnecessary. President Obama and Kathleen Sebelius, his Secretary of Health and Human Services, have used the health care law with the prevention mandate to actually force Americans to pay for drugs and procedures that violate the conscience rights of many Americans. So good people, religious institutions, other people of goodwill, people of faith are being asked to choose. Follow your deeply held reasoned beliefs or obey President Obama. That's un-American. It's unfair, and it's a false choice. So a lot of good people petitioned the administration, said change the rule. They ignored it. Now, we had a bill, I wrote a bill over a year ago called Respect for Rights of Conscience in anticipation that the health care law might be abused. I couldn't have imagined that this would have happened, but we have 224 co-sponsors of that bipartisan bill. A lot of members recognize that there's a principle of religious liberty and the rights of conscience at stake here. So, and then the third prong of attack, of course, is in the court system, where I think it's 43 institutions, Catholic and otherwise, and some good business persons as well have stepped up to say, you know, this is not just about protecting the church per se as an institution. It's about a deeper principle of the rights of conscience, individual liberty, as well as religious freedom. And that applies to everyone, not just religious institutions. So to talk about an exemption of somehow of an institution doesn't get to the core heart of the philosophical issue here. The government ought to be upholding rights, not coercing people into violating their conscience.
What if the court comes out, strikes the mandate, but leaves the rest of the law in place? What happens?
Yeah, this is a real dilemma. We don't know what's going to happen. It looks like a jump ball at the moment. One of three things could happen. They could leave the whole thing in place, strike the mandate, and then...
But wouldn't Congress have to get involved to roll back, to repeal the law?
Yes, potentially. But again, this was the president's initiative, and it'd be important for the president to show some leadership here. What happens to the rulemaking authority, like this HHS mandate, it's unclear, and we're trying to work through that process now. Repealing the health care law, starting over with the right type of health care reforms that are actually going to reduce costs and improve health care outcomes while protecting vulnerable people, is the best pathway to take. But the health care law now has become an ideological platform. I need to tell you this, because this was so disturbing to me. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, within the last few months, before a pro-abortion industry group said, we are at war. At war with whom? With you and me and other Catholics, other people of goodwill who are pro-life and who believe that the government should stay within certain limits and not be used as an ideological platform. I just think it's unconscionable that a member, one of the highest ranking officials of the United States government, would suggest she is at war with the American people over this. So that's the ideological drive that's at stake here. And I simply think it's important for Congress to continue to try to act while we look at what is potentially going to happen in the court system.
Right. While you bring up the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and I hope we have this video ready. I happened to be on the Hill this week, and I ran into Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius. So I thought I would take the opportunity to ask her about the accommodation to the HHS mandate put forward by the administration, and the bishop's insistence that it is not an accommodation at all. I got the feeling she didn't want to talk to me. Roll the tape.
I'm Raymond Arroyo, EWTN News. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
With the bishops,
I'm sorry. I'm
Can you
getting
talk
in
for
the
a
car.
moment?
No, I can't.
Okay. All right. Well, that was it. She got into the car. She sort of ran off and got into the car, which was perplexing. Why aren't they willing to have a conversation about this? Given the outrage across the country, the fact that you have all the bishops of the United States unified, the first time in my memory certainly, around one issue like this, where you had civil disobedience being urged, as well as a public push to change a piece of legislation, or in this case, a rule. Why not have some dialogue, some conversation in the midst of the political pressure, if nothing else?
Well, again, I have to presume that it's a particular worldview and ideology that is using the strong arm of government to be imposed, enforced, imposed upon the American people and enforced by the law. It is causing a great deal of political volatility, but everybody watching the show has to realize that August 1st is D-Day here. That after that, this law is in effect, and then there's effectively no exemptions. They're very limited. A lot of Catholic institutions will be affected, as well as other Christian organizations and other secular organizations.
Right.
Business people who have health care plans are going to have to pay for things that they may not wish to provide, such as sterilization and abortion-inducing drugs. People are going to, in effect, have to subsidize them who don't want to buy them as a part of their health care plan.
But Congressman,
it's taking away their choice.
I know you have 200+ co-sponsors of this bill. You can get it through the House.
Right.
You're not going to get it through the Senate. So where does that leave the bill right now?
Well, we all have to do what we can. The bill is stalled. Obviously, the Senate, well, you know, the Senate took a vote on this and it didn't win. There was a strong minority. We in the House have a majority. The whole conversation got derailed by a very problematic debate about access to contraception, which is not the case here. This is about religious liberty and the rights of conscience, as well as individual liberty. And I think it's important for the leaders of this country to actually continue that debate in a reasoned, measured, prudential manner that lays out the facts, that shows most Americans that this is violating a fundamental American principle of the rights of conscience.
Tell people exactly what your bill would do. It's not only about this HHS mandate.
No.
In fact, it was
written
drafted before.
It would apply in the circumstances, but again, we couldn't have imagined that this would be the application. It restores the respect for the rights of conscience and religious liberty that were operative in our healthcare system prior to this new healthcare bill. That's all it does. It is very consistent with the way the law was prior to this, the way in which we were all living, in which we respected one another's rights of conscience and religious liberty in healthcare.
And it also prevents any retaliatory actions should people decide not to adopt one approach or another, right? If they're acting in conscience.
It's a broad exemption. If somebody says they have a moral precept or religious problem with a particular health care issue that's being imposed upon them, they don't have to provide it.
This week at Fort Polk in Louisiana, my home state, the first same-sex marriage took place on a military installation at Fort Polk. It was carried out by a chaplain, a Disciples of Christ chaplain, with the approval of the chaplaincy. Your thoughts on what that historical moment may mean, and do you think this could be a scene or a platform for threats against religious liberty?
Well, we actually just dealt with this issue. It was probably quiet. You may not have heard about it. In the Defense Authorization Bill, which came through the House, no chaplain can be forced to perform a same-sex marriage. Now, interestingly,
but that bill also said that no same-sex ceremonies or same-sex-like ceremonies, like marriage ceremonies, could take place on a military installation. It happened.
Well, and there's another conflict in law here. Federal law, the Defense of Marriage Act, defines marriage as between a man and woman. So here the federal government is recognizing what, in a new process, what current law does not actually state.
Okay, but how did this happen then? I mean, you had a federal. If you have a federal law and that's already passed both houses, right? Signed by the president. The defense appropriation.
President Clinton signed. The Defense of Marriage Act was signed by President.
I knew that, but
Clinton.
I'm talking about the defense appropriation.
Not yet, but
that hasn't been signed yet.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's still out there,
right?
And do you think this is going to pose challenges in the days to come?
Well, it's just symbolic of the deeper divide here. Of again. We all believe that no person should face persecution or live in fear of persecution. But again, marriage in its essence and nature is between a man and woman. The government doesn't redefine marriage. It affirms what marriage is. It has always done that for the benefit of society, for the benefit of men and women, particularly children as well. So this is, in a sense, a clash of philosophical paradigms that is being fought out culturally in our society. It's being fought out politically, and it's being fought out by wrangling within the bureaucracy as well, as this case shows.
Yeah. Where do you think, getting back to the healthcare debate and the HHS mandate, where in your gut do you think this is going?
Well, I think we're all anticipating what the court will do right now. And then, of course, the legal challenges have very real merit. They are basing their case on a law from the 1990s called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which basically Congress says you can't do this to people. You can't. Yeah. The government has no compelling right to force someone to violate their religious liberty, particularly in forcing people to buy drugs. There's no compelling right here of the government. There's no problem of access, and if there was, if the government chose, they could fix that access without making Americans who don't believe in this buy things in violation of their conscience.
What do you make of, go ahead.
That in the short term, and I think is what we're all waiting for. If the court upholds the law, then we go back to looking at legislative remedies, and we're going to have to act fast.
Then it becomes a political fight.
Then it becomes a presidential fight as well.
Final question. The bishops' fortnight for freedom and this entire push you've seen from them, what do you make of their efforts?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. I have never seen anything, the unity, the speaking with one voice, the speaking with clarity about a moral truth that goes beyond the church. It's speaking to Americans about what is a most American principle of the rights of conscience and religious freedom. It's extraordinary leadership that's being shown. And by the way, it's very fortifying to me as a member of Congress. We look at this law as a potential problem. We had written the bill, as I said earlier, a year ahead of time. Couldn't imagine this manifestation of the problem.
You were way out ahead of this.
Well, we just sensed that there could be abuse here, and now we've seen it in its most ugliest form. So for the church to rally around this has been very, very meaningful to me and a lot of members of Congress. It's also motivated other religious organizations and other people of goodwill who don't share the faith, Muslims and Jews, and simply other people who recognize, you know what, there are limits to the government. You shouldn't have to be forced to violate your conscience. That's a false choice. The government shouldn't do that. The government is about protecting rights, not conferring rights. No one should have to kneel in front of the emperor and say, exempt me from this, please. And if that's the case, people need to change who their representatives are.
Very good. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, thank you so much for being here, and we will certainly follow the progress of your bill as it goes forward. Up next, she is an attorney and a tireless advocate for children. Elizabeth Yore is concerned about the impact of social networking on your kids. What are the dangers they face, and how can you protect them? The World Over Live continues after this break. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My next guest has spent 30 years defending and advocating for children all over the world. She has served as General Counsel for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, as well as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Recently, she was Special Counsel to Harpo Productions, Oprah Winfrey's company. Here to talk about social networking and Facebook's plan to make their services available to kids under 13 is Elizabeth Yore. Elizabeth,
Hi,
welcome
Raymond.
back to the show.
Thank you.
Let's talk for a moment about this. I saw this story this week, and I thought, if there's one person who can talk us through this, it's Liz Yore. Wall Street Journal and everyone was reporting Facebook wants to expand its platform to those 13 and under, and they're saying the parents will be involved. Liz, What is the problem?
Well, this was a trial balloon, and I'm hoping the parents of America and around the world will pop that balloon, because they're trying to gauge the parental response as well as Congress's response. This would be absolute disaster.
Why?
Remember about a month ago, there was this major investigation about software filters that did not work on Facebook. Facebook had announced that they would never have children's pictures and child pornography. In fact, that software did not work. Here they come again saying we're creating software technology so children under the age of 13 can navigate safely with their parents' permission and with parents consenting to their travel around Facebook. And it's not going to work. There are going to be gaps and holes. And isn't it interesting that this new technology and announcement comes, what, a week after the IPO? This is all about accessing the very valuable tween consumer block that is huge advertising revenue for Facebook. And Facebook has got to continue to grow their revenue. And that's what this is about.
Liz, 55% of parents in a survey this week said their children, 13 and under, are already on Facebook. So the Facebook people say they need to do something because you've got 7.5 million children already there. Isn't it better to connect them to the parents' account somehow so there's some accountability?
I have a hard time believing that, first of all, the technology will exist, that they'll be able to connect with the children. I think this is clearly a way to get those children on legitimately under Facebook's rubric. My concern, ask the parents, would you parachute your child into the red light district of, for example, Thailand or Amsterdam and say to the community walking down the street, take care of my child, make sure they don't see anything they shouldn't see, and call the police? Well, that's precisely what is going on on Facebook. 1 billion users. Many of these users, there's sex, there's violence, there's predators, there's child pornography, there's pornography, and Facebook cannot protect, nor all the users protect children from seeing
And
that.
what Facebook really does and why they want the kids online is to market things to them. I mean, we have to be honest. That's the business angle here.
Raymond, the fastest growing app are game line apps, and that's what they're targeting for these tweens. It's a hot commodity, and that's what they want to bring more and more revenue stream because, after all, they're an IPO, they're a public company, they have to answer to their shareholders.
Liz, you have a lot of experience with exploited children and children who've gone missing. How will technology like this, not only Facebook, but other social networks like this, how do predators use this to get at these children?
Well, predators go where the kids are. The kids are on the social networking. They use child pornography. They use the grooming techniques, your standard grooming techniques, sending emails to children, sending pictures to children, friending children, saying, oh, you know, I love your picture, you're good looking, I bet your parents are mean. They do whatever they can to separate that child from their family support system.
And it's a portal. It's a portal there.
Absolutely.
I'm suspicious of whether kids would even want to be on Facebook if they're connected to their parents. Why not go to Pinterest or one of these newer sites that mom and dad are totally clueless on? I mean, I know the name Pinterest.
Yes.
Never been there in my life.
I'm very impressed.
Yeah. So you know,
Raymond,
but there are emerging social networks that these kids are far more plugged into than their parents. So it's the general idea of any social network being a vulnerable entryway for predators.
Well, the other piece is that this is what many child psychiatrists are saying is the zombie generation.
Explain that.
By that I mean, for example, a Kaiser Foundation study said your average 8 to 18-year-old child in the United States spends nearly 8 hours a day with media. They are unable, and the brain, especially in children, is growing and very malleable, and children need interaction with people, not a screen. That's why we have the rise of bullying. It's because when you type mean things into a computer, you do not see the physical reaction of hurt and pain from the person that you're victimizing and bullying. That's what creates empathy. And we are creating a generation of children who do not have empathy. And why is empathy essential? Because we have millions in jail who do not have empathy. They didn't have empathy for the victims they raped, for the victims they robbed, for the victims they killed. Empathy is created on one-on-one interaction, face-to-face, on the floor playing, singing with your children, and creating values.
Yeah, there was another study this week that said texting, the preponderance of texting, people in the same house texting to communicate, and that this becomes, not only do they miss the verbal and visual clues of human interaction, but they also avoid crucial and important conversations.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking, how do you pass on a faith? How do you pass on values if your entire connection to your kid is this?
Let me tell you the story. They have been, the new neuroscientists have been studying the brain, and they are studying through MRIs boys who are playing violent video games, and the pleasure center of the brain lights up on this child when there are violent video games. What you want your children's pleasure center to light up when they're doing good things, when they have values, when kindness, service, that should light up the pleasure vein, not violent video games.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What should parents do? And this is a big question because some people feel, look, the whole class is already on Facebook, or the whole class have their Twitter accounts. Junior wants one too.
This is my strong belief. First of all, parents need to know that they are empowered. This trial balloon by Facebook, it is begging for an answer from parents to say, no, we're not going to allow this, for Congress to say we're not going to allow this. Facebook's waiting to hear from the public. Parents, they can contact me on my website. There's a link to Facebook and to Congress.
I'll mention it in a moment.
To protest it. Parents need to get engaged. We have no idea in this experiment of a tech generation. We are going to be suffering for generations of trying to bring back the human element. Parents need to intervene now.
An email came in. I want to share this with you. It says, first of all, Facebook has in its terms the following. You will not use Facebook if you are a convicted sex offender. My question is this: how can an internet site check anyone's age or status? The internet's not a personal thing. It's designed to be anonymous. That's from B. Ryder, who apparently isn't anonymous. Go ahead.
Well, and that's right. And secondly, we know from that last investigation in WorldNet Daily that there were all sorts of predators and pedophiles on Facebook, most of whom are never convicted. A small. So even if they were to do a background search, they're not going to pop up. No.
Wow. I want to talk about this show. There's a show, Mad Men, that apparently has gone a little mad. I don't watch it, so I'm not terribly familiar, but quoting from press reports, the New York Post did a piece today, Linda Stassi's piece, talking about Sally Draper. She's an 11-year-old child in the piece. She's the daughter of the main character. They apparently have depicted her in several sexually graphic scenes. This is a family show. I don't want to describe them, but these are actions as well as things she is happening upon or things happening to her physically. My question is, depicting an 11-year-old child in these shows, Linda Stassi writes this line, and I want your reaction as a professional in this area. She says, but for what purpose are they doing this? I can't help but wonder why the creators of this program, whether they ever consider if scenes like this excite sexual predators. Do they care? Surely this must panic her parents, no?
You know, absolutely they excite predators. You know, I've seen the conversations online between predators. They're talking about this show. They're talking about this child. And they use that to groom other children. This is the sexualization of children and really borders on child pornography and certainly child exploitation.
Yeah.
And that's why parents need to contact the producers of the show and speak with one loud voice that we cannot have our children watching this or encouraging predators to use these to lure kids.
Yeah, well, and I think it's something that, you know, people want to be edgy, they want to be expressive, they want to kind of cut through, and look, they do, but at what cost? And I think we rarely consider that. Now, what would you recommend? Do you think Congress should be coming down and restricting this sort of content?
They really should be restricting this kind of conduct. And I will tell you, TV shows do respond to the public. And there needs to be a groundswell of contacting the show, contacting the sponsors, and to say we are not going to tolerate this exploitation of children, this sexualization that we see in prime time. We see it in daytime TV. We see it in commercials. We see it during the Super Bowl. And parents are consumers of this and do have a lot more power than they give themselves credit for.
There was a program a few years ago on MTV, maybe a year ago, and it was remember young kids under 15, and they were depicting sexual acts, etc. And it was bumped off the air because of the outcry. I often wonder, though, if you've got a child playing an 11-year-old, where are her parents telling the producers of the show, you know, I respect your artistic integrity and your intention to be edgy, but this is my child, and she's not doing that?
Well, you talk to the child actors in Hollywood who have now grown up, and you know they're very concerned about the exploitation of children, and that the producers and scriptwriters need to be extremely careful, because this is visualization for the world to see. And gives license for others to do so.
Well, and as Norman Lear said this week, the more you put an image up and the more frequently you broadcast it, the quicker that becomes normalcy.
That's right.
And this is, when I read this story, I thought, yeah. Kevin from New York, you're on the World Over Live. What's your question, Kevin?
Hi. Well, I'd like to know what Facebook is going to do to help prevent it being used as a tool for bullying. My son has been a constant victim. When I moved him from one school to another, they quickly got on the network and Facebook with another kid in another school saying, look who's coming, do this. Bullying used to end at 3 o'clock. No more, comes right into the home.
24 hours of bullying.
24 hours of bullying. That's why these social networks are so dangerous for kids. What we were talking about before, the inability to have any kind of empathy. And I'll tell you what, Facebook, Microsoft, none of these social networks that have 1 billion citizens have a 911 button. So dad, who sees this going on, or his son can press the button and say, I'm being bullied. This is dangerous. If you're going to open up your community to the world, and there's all sorts of dangers on Facebook, you should have a 911 button. They can do it.
Speaking of child advocacy and concerns about young people, a school in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles School District, partnered with Planned Parenthood. They have an in-school clinic at the Roosevelt High School. They say teen pregnancy is on the rise here. We're going to put a clinic on site to provide contraceptives, emergency contraceptives. Now, bear in mind, and I looked it up before the show, at that same school, the parent needs to fill out explicit documents for the kid to get any medication, including aspirins, but they can walk into this clinic, no questions asked, and take whatever they want. This is a problem?
This is a problem all over the country. It happens. And it's, again, adults giving children the sexual license to misbehave, to lowering the bar for behavior. It is so dangerous for children. And we know, you know, handing out contraceptives and birth control hasn't lowered the, you know, abortion rate or pregnancy rate. And it's very concerning, especially with children. They should be studying. They should be playing sports. They should be in drama. They should be singing. And yet the presence of Planned Parenthood says, you know, we know you're having sex, and so we are going to, provide you this service, instead of creating a value-centered school system that, you know, first of all, celebrates abstinence, which of course we never hear. And that's the one guarantee that there won't be pregnancy. And it's this drumbeat that children see both in the media as well as in school is sex, sex, sex. And how hard it is for kids to stand up and say, I believe in abstinence, when the whole world, including their administrators, are saying it's okay.
Yeah, well, you've got calculus, lunch, you pick up your contraceptives, and then you go on to physical education. I mean, to have it on site is also, and the role of parents and the leadership of parents in the lives of these kids, it seems, is being totally removed.
We know that from Planned Parenthood and abortions. Children come in all the time. You know, the victims of incest and rape, and they're not reported to law enforcement. They're mandated reporters. Those children have been exploited, and they provide this procedure without parental approval. And, you know, it's those kinds of things. It's taking the power away from the parents and allowing the society with all of it, you know, and sex. In an edgy society, sex keeps raising the bar.
Very good. Liz Yore, thanks so much for
Thanks.
being here. We'll
Thank
have you
you,
back
Raymond.
to read
Thanks.
Elizabeth Yore's columns and other important research and resources to help and protect children from abuse and exploitation. Visit yorechildren.com, Y-O-R-E children.com. Up next, Dr. CAROLYN Woo, the new president of Catholic Relief Services, is here to tell us about the challenges they're facing getting relief to troubled spots all over the world. And later, I'll weigh in on the much reported Vatican crackdown on nuns. Crackdown? Really? The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. Catholic Relief Services is the official U.S. Bishop's outreach to the poor and vulnerable all over the world. My next guest is the former Dean of the School of Business at the University of Notre Dame and the new president and CEO of Catholic Relief Services. Here to tell us about their important work, particularly in Sudan, Haiti, and Somalia, is Dr. CAROLYN Woo.
Thank you.
Dr. Woo, congratulations and welcome to the program. Now tell me, what do you want Catholics and non-Catholics to know about the work of CRS? You all are ranked every year, and I've been looking at the various institutions that rate nonprofits. You all have the lowest overhead of just about anybody, and the highest output. 94% of the monies given go directly to aid. Tell me what else you want people to know about what you do.
Well, thank you very much, Raymond. I just want people to know, particularly Catholics, first of all, that CRS is actually your agency. CRS belongs to the U.S. Catholic Church. And the second thing is that we do excellent work. It's not just about serving the common good, but it's do it with uncommon excellence. And stewardship is one of the things that we really are very committed to, so that we know how much it takes to feed a child. It's about $150 to keep a child fed 1 year. So we're very careful with the resources which are given to us. And the third thing people should know is that we serve on the basis of need, not on the basis of creed. We follow the gospel. Matthew 25, which Mother Teresa called it the one-hand gospel. You did it for me.
I love that. Now, tell me about your view and vision for CRS, particularly given your business background as the Dean of the Business School at Notre Dame. Surely you come at this with a certain eye.
Yes. I think that the vision for CRS is to really serve people in need all over the world, wherever that need is, but to do it with unmatched excellence, not for us, but because the people who we're serving deserve nothing but our very best. The people who support us with their resources deserve nothing but the very best. So the second one is operational excellence. And the third one is that we really want to engage U.S. Catholics in our work.
Tell me about some of these hot spots. I know when a crisis breaks out, like Haiti in 2010, CRS was there, but you all were already in place. You'd been there for, what, 50 years?
That's correct.
On site.
58 years.
58 years. And you're still there. Tell me what's happening now. Immediately it was the relief and shelter and the tarps and get people in out of the elements. What are you doing now?
So we begin with emergency. But the second stage is stabilization. And the third stage is actually transformation. So when we go into a country in an emergency, we actually have a long-term plan. We have a 5-year plan. And we don't just stop with giving people food in a tent or medicine. So we have a vision as to where we would take them so that there is permanent, sustainable solutions to people's life. So in Haiti, the first phase of relief, we served over 1 million people in terms of providing food, and then we have people who have medicine. The second stage is to return people to their neighborhoods. And that's actually very hard work because a lot of people don't have land titles. We have rupples in their neighborhood. And so now our goal is about 12,500 families. We're almost there. And we're only about 2 years after the earthquake.
Yeah.
So we don't just return people to the neighborhoods. They have a wonderful shelter. We provide vouchers for education. We make sure that there's livelihood for the people because then they could make a living. We make sure that there is sanitation to prevent outbreaks of cholera. Yeah. We make sure that there is water. So that you see stabilization. Our third stage now, and we've begun working on it, is long-term transformation. And the three areas we work in is Catholic education, Catholic health care, and also taking small farmers what we call from mountain to market. And that is how can we turn them from living at a subsistence level to a much more resilient level.
Yeah, turning them into real entrepreneurs.
That's
on
right.
The ground. Interesting. Let's talk about Sudan. I have covered this story for so many years and witnessed the terrible sufferings, particularly the animists and the Christians in the region have undergone. You all have extensive resources in Sudan. How has it been now with this conflict between the North and the South? I know it's been difficult getting aid into the region.
It is a difficult situation. So in one more month, there will be the first anniversary of the independence of South Sudan. We actually see a lot of conflict between Sudan and South Sudan. The border region is a difficult area. We see a lot of refugees coming into South Sudan. We see potential famine, and actually famine happening. We see some violence there. We say the situation has deteriorated, so it's not time to just assume that everything is working in Sudan and South Sudan. I think it needs continuous attention.
Tell me about your efforts, and this is something people don't often think about when they think about CRS. You all have made enormous strides in the area of HIV and AIDS infections. Tell me about your work in that region all over the world, particularly in Africa.
Very exciting. So I would say about 10, 11 years ago, we did no work in HIV/AIDS, really. And then with President Bush PEPFAR program, we formed a consortium where we were the lead organizer called AIDS Relief. We were one of the biggest recipients of the grant. And now we have completed phase 1. We are now in phase 2, and now some scientific evidence says that we could actually see an end to HIV/AIDS because of this work. That 2 years ago, it would be hard to see that. But all of the work that has been done, and particularly cultivating long-term habits and the provision of drugs which are affordable to the local population, and to do it in such a way which is high quality, we actually are seeing results. Now in phase 2, we're actually turning over the work to 8 countries. We worked in 10 countries. We're turning the work to partners in 8 countries because they've worked with us for the last 10 years. And a lot of these organizations now, they're ready to take the lead in this work.
What has been the most, I guess, moving and profound experience you've had directly since coming to this role as head of CRS?
So on my iPhone, I carry a picture that I took in Haiti. I went into one of our shelters. It's a good shelter. It's humble. You know, it's about 14 by 16 with plywood walls and concrete base. And on the wall, these 3 words were scrawled: God is good. And so you think about a family with very little, but such praise, such sense of blessings.
That was their
That was
tribute.
humbling, yes.
Beautiful. Now, you grew up in Hong Kong,
Yes.
correct? How has that, having a wider vision, if you will, of the world and not a particularly American, exclusively American vision, how has that helped you in this work?
In multiple ways. So I saw Hong Kong when it was really basically a community of refugees and immigrants. People left China around the time of the communist government. People had nothing. They started all over again. So sometimes people ask me whether I'm depressed being faced with all of these problems. And the answer is no, I'm not. Because I've actually seen how you could build a decade at a time, a year at a time, a generation at a time.
And change a society.
Progress and changes that. That's number 1. Number 2, I was educated by the Maryknoll sisters. They were so filled with joy and a can-do spirit. And my experience with them over 12 years was a sense that God was very real. and that it didn't just depend on us, it depended on God, and that there was a tremendous sense of joy. And I would say the third and final thing is that Hong Kong was a very diverse place in this sense. It was mostly Chinese, but it was governed by a Western government, right? We were Chinese, the official language was English. I was Catholic, but we lived amidst the Buddhists. And so, but there was so much harmony with these different kind of, what could have been polarized.
Yeah. Everybody sort of pulled together.
But we pulled together.
Beautiful. Well, I thank you for your great work, and,
thank you.
And hope you'll come back. And please let us know. We want to make sure the audience knows about the good work you're doing and what's happening in these various areas of the world. This is, when we talk about the body of Christ,
Absolutely. This is the American Catholics' work.
Very good. Thank you so much. You can find much more about the work of Catholic Relief Services at their website, crs.org. Before we go, let's cut to the chase. This week, newspapers and newscasts continued to run headlines like this one from CNN. Vatican intensifying crackdown on American nuns. The supposition is that the Vatican is persecuting the nuns, just to be ornery. First, a clarification. To suggest that the Holy See is, quote, engaged in an intense fight with American nuns is just not accurate. Reading some of these reports, you'd swear the sisters are being led to the rack. Here's the truth. The Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith has issued a report criticizing, or critiquing rather, the teachings and pronouncements of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious. This is a group, the press is quick to say, represents 80% of American nuns. In truth, the Leadership Conference is an organization of female religious superiors. And to suggest that those superiors embody the beliefs of every sister in their respective houses is ludicrous. In fact, I know from letters and calls I personally received that there are scads of faithful sisters heartbroken over the tragic direction their orders have taken in recent decades. In obedience, they keep their heads down and they try to live out their lives. So what exactly did the Vatican say to upset the nuns? The report, issued after an extensive study, says that the Leadership Conference had promoted radical feminist themes incompatible with the Catholic faith. The organization is charged with departing from church teaching on the Eucharist, the all-male priesthood, abortion, and homosexuality. And the horrible penance meted out by the uncaring patriarchy in Rome, the Leadership Council is asked to rewrite its statutes, undergo a period of reform in coordination with a bishop, and create conferences and programs that support church teaching and religious life. Oh, the horror! Far from a crackdown, this is a very gentle search and rescue mission. Many of these Leadership Council orders are graying with nary a vocation in sight. And if you are still convinced that there is a Vatican war on American nuns, there is another organization of female religious in the U.S., and the Vatican isn't calling them out at all. The Council of Major Superiors of Women Religious represent 20% of the nuns in the country, but 43% of those orders have 5 novices or more, new sisters in training. Only 9% of the Leadership Council communities have 5 or more novices. So again, to say that the Vatican is cracking down on American nuns is fallacious. They are trying to help some American nuns return to the fold. Sister Simone Campbell, Executive Director of the liberal lobbying group Network, which was also mentioned in the Vatican report, has announced a Nuns on the Bus tour. In a few weeks, she and 11 other sisters will begin a rolling campaign of awareness. Given the concerns voiced by the Holy See, one might think the sisters would use the trip to teach confused Catholics about the Eucharist or restate their commitment to church teaching. Sister Campbell plans to use the bus tour to draw attention to social justice and to protest Representative Paul Ryan's budget plan, which never made it out of the Senate. No wonder the Vatican is concerned. That's all the time we have. Until next week, you can find updates and the occasional commentary by following me on Twitter, twitter.com/Raymond Arroyo. My Twitter and Facebook pages are linked at raymondarroyo.com. Now, starting June 21st, we will be hosting several specials and town hall meetings during the National Fortnight for Freedom called by the U.S. bishops. Stay tuned for more details. Next week, Dr. Meg Meeker will be here and will bring you highlights of the bishops' spring meeting. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. See you next time. Bye now.